Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of our Pride Today because we ran out of time on our live show because there's so much to talk about. And so we decided let's get back together and do the second part because we really wanted to talk about the community side of things and being inside of the LGBTQ community and how it's perceived from general populace, I guess is the best way to put it. And so just like last time, we're going to be getting in the trenches probably a little more than we did last time. So this isn't meant to offend anybody. It's just meant to have discussions. Just join in the discussion. That's all we ask you to do. So let's again, in case you guys missed the first episode, we talked about how LGBTQ representation in Hollywood and media and pop culture was growing. Really great episode. Had a great time with it. This time we're really going to be looking at what it means to be LGBTQ, the whole community as a whole, the issues that come with it, the benefits that come with it, things like that. So let's introduce all of our wonderful co-hosts. I'm Gavin, founder of Kaiju Labs Media, fun guy. I will be mostly hosting, letting these other three talk because they've really lived this life more than I have. We're joined by, let's start with Brad.
I'm Brad. I run Brad's Red Web. It's a comic book culture talk show, and I am a lifelong geek and hardcore gay, straight out of the closet, and there's no going back.
And we have Courtney.
Hi, Courtney. You've seen me on Ladies of Fandom and a couple of other things, and I will be starting up a new project here soon, dealing with fandom nonconforming. So, as you can tell by the flag in the background, I have been out and proud since about middle school. Finally had the language for it a decade and a half ago. God, that dates me, doesn't it?
We're all dated. Like earlier, Brad was like, "Aren't you as old as Greg?" I was like, "Yes."
Brad's probably 10 years older than me.
Yeah. And then our very special guest, we have Tavis.
Hello. I'm Tavis, and I am an LGBTQ psychologist. I teach counseling skills and cross-cultural psychology at Richmond, the American International University in London, and Niccolo Cusano Italian University in London.
Nice.
Just all around busy, fun guy. So I'm really happy you guys can all come back because we did talk a lot about things and we had very extensive notes. So part one of this show, because we're going to do both the sections to, this show is from the inside. Now, I did not grow up like this. I did not grow up as part of this community. I did not grow up as part of this culture. I always just thought there was one world and we all lived in it together. But then when I got with Phil and I watched things like Pose and I've started to experience more of how the culture was, I started having a lot of problems with the way things were and I just didn't quite understand it. So I want to start with, what issues are we facing from within the LGBTQ community? And what I find completely sad and I don't understand is the infighting and attacking each other. I did not know that there was like a class system within this culture. I did not know trans people were included in this culture. To me, they have always been part of this culture. I know trans people. I don't think of them any differently than I do anybody else. But apparently, it just seems to be that way. So I want to discuss the reasons why. And I want to start with Tavis because when I brought this up to him, he kind of laid it out to me in an easy way to understand. So Tavis, why are we like this?
Well, it's kind of a two-pronged sort of answer, really. One is that it's not new. It's always been like this.
Yeah.
When we go all the way back, I say all the way back, but really I'm kind of just sort of starting at the 60s and 70s when we're looking at queer liberation, Stonewall, and we're starting to see these sort of uprisings in London, New York City, and elsewhere. What we're seeing is that as people are getting organized, the organizations are often fronted by gay men, and there's an expectation that lesbian women are going to be joining and working with them because it's everybody's liberation. But as things start to kind of move forward, the women who are more motivated by feminism are beginning to take notice and take issue that there's a stream of misogyny going on with the gay men within the organization. And admittedly out of necessity because they don't have Grindr yet, it's a bit of a hookup in a way that's not what women are there for. And so that really starts to spell out, particularly from feminist theory, more from gay affirmative, that there is still gender inequality even within those who have same-sex desire. So as a result, that kind of starts a trend of, well, the only thing we really have in common is that we're not straight. And that really isn't something that you can have in common, because it's just something that you don't have in common. So this has led to what kind of people call the alphabet soup of sexuality. We have LGBTQ, QIAA, etc., etc. And the idea is that the alphabet soup gets longer and longer and longer, because the only thing we all don't have in common is heterosexuality and a side gender identity. So in this sort of situation, we see conflict between the groups based on who deserves progress next.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, and that's like across the board, like even between two very parallel sexualities like pansexual and bisexual. And this is a product simply of the language of the time that I was discovering all of this. Bisexual literally meant at the time you were attracted to men and women, but that didn't describe the way I experienced sexuality and sexual desire. For me, it's like, is it human? Is it capable of giving informed, enthusiastic consent? And is it adult? Yes to all three? Then let's have some fun, kind of thing. But nowadays, bisexual has expanded to cover a lot of the same things that pansexuality covers. You're not attracted to just men or just women. You're attracted to both along all brands and bands of the spectrum on bisexuality. But there's still this divide because of how the language has changed, that some people still perceive bisexuality as being exclusive of the trans experience, and it's not at this point. It never really was. It's just now that we have better language to understand these things, there seems to be this divide. And it's like, some people think pan is bi erasure, whereas some people think bi is pan erasure. We can coexist and that sort of thing. But it's also the fact that language, especially among the gender and sexual minority community, has expanded so fast comparatively to the way language overall expands. Like, the language of the 1950s is not the same English of 2020. But that expanded over like a century, whereas the GLBT community, the gender sexual minority community, that language has expanded over twice or half the time, twice as much. So a lot of it is just simple language barrier and generational barrier.
Yeah, actually, when I came out, I was lucky enough to have ended up in an environment that was multi-generational. Because I went straight from high school to live with my gay uncles and come out in a safe environment. But their best friends were an older gay couple, and after my uncle's partner passed, he actually dated an older. He ended up marrying a generational difference, and so I've seen, like, within a single environment, all of the language across the way in different ways and things. But one of the things you're saying, it's the way that we identify ourselves, and that's also the way that the other communities identify us. And one of the things that Tavis was talking about, I'm like, for instance, bisexual. I have had experience and friends who are bisexual, and when they explain to me the frustration, that's not just what straight people think of us, it's what we think of ourselves within our community. And I have heard so much disparaging stuff from other gays or straight women, because there's the threat. Women don't want to date a bisexual because there's the threat that he's going to leave her for a man, and you just can't compete with that. And then there's also the idea with gay men that they feel like bisexuals are just unsure, and that and yes, it goes without saying that there have been plenty of gay men, especially in the media and in the public eye, who are gay but came out as bisexual to kind of pad the transition to acceptance as gay. We know that's a thing. But at the same time, genuine bisexuals have to fight that stigma of people going, oh, no, they're just experimenting, or they're just not sure, and they're gay.
It's just a phase.
It's just a phase, you know. And then we get that from both sides. So they have to listen to the straight people going, "Oh, it's a phase. You're really straight, and you'll get over it." And they have to listen to the gay people say, "Oh, it's a phase. You're really gay, and you'll get over it." And you know, and that's just kind of And then when you're talking about the men and women, gay men and gay women, it was something that very early on when I came out, and I was trying to understand. It's like, why do we even have a separate word? Why is lesbian even a word? It always, in my brain, I was like, we're all gay, right? You know, and then when I had my lesbian friends explain to me, and you're talking about, you know, with the feminism angle of it, and I mean, there's so much inherent misogyny that you don't even think about. And one of them is, you're talking about, gender inequality. The thing with gay men is you generally have, not until more modern times, you generally had no children and two men, both who were making higher wages than the women were. So they had better income. So you have a lot of disposable income. And this is what led to a lot of what people associate with the gay culture at the time. And the women did not have that. They had, you know, they're still fighting for equality on a whole nother front on top of it, you know, and the idea of I mean, I went shopping with a friend one time, and he was a straight guy. And before he knew what was going on, like one of the shop ladies, I mean, this was at like a Macy's or something, and she was like fawning all over him. And he's like, I need you to go shopping with me more because you got all this attention. I'm like, they think we're a couple. And he's like, well, what does that mean? They work on commission. They think we're a couple. They automatically assume they're going to get more money out of us because we're a gay couple. I was like, trust me, I've seen this before. And it is so weird that that's a thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much of that really works nowadays, because now we're normalizing into society, and we're starting to have kids, and we're starting to be able to fit with that, you know, and then the gender roles of men are changing, you know, to house husbands and stuff like that, you know, but we still have so much distance to gap outside of just sexuality to match up, you know, and, you know, we're talking about race. When I was going to school in Louisiana, I dated a guy, and he was on a football scholarship, and I really, really liked him, but I had to break it off because he was just too uncomfortable being even remote. Like, we never went anywhere people would see us. And when I started figuring out that I think he just had a fetish for white guys, I think he just wanted me, you know, it's like, you can't just like me because I'm a white guy, you know? And at the same time, it's like, I respect that you don't want to come out and you don't want to, your scholarship. But while I lived there, I saw Black gays were it was really weird to me, especially because I grew up in kind of like a pseudo hippie kind of world where, you know, I didn't, like Gavin was saying, he didn't realize until he was older that there was this like class difference. I didn't realize that Black and Hispanic was like meant anything until I got into middle school, and we moved back, and we moved to South Texas. Like, I grew up in an integrated world. My parents kind of, you know, and it wasn't a thing to me, but when I saw it, it was such a eye opener, a shocker to like, it's like, wow, this is so, it's bizarre.
So weird.
If you don't grow up in it, it really does hit you in a different way.
Yeah, because I don't understand why we're just not all just all. I don't understand why there's this thing. It seems like someone's always wanting to be the target. It almost seems like.
If you take like psychology, basic psychology, and you talk about the whole us versus them, it's like a basic need for groups of society, and I've seen this in a lot of things, and studying comic books, you see it in a lot of things. But it's a rivalry is necessary to keep things in a certain way, and it's just difficult to find the right
balance between tension and cooperation.
Like, you know, when I went to high school, and it was weird to me that I was at the white high school. I'm like, it was about 50% white, which I guess, considering that, you know, it's 40% Black and 10% other, that's still a little unbalanced. But our rival high school was the Black high school, and it was like 50% Black. I'm like, to my brain, it's like, it's Gavin, it's like, it's just people that, you know, and it's like, yeah, you want the healthy rivalry, but and a lot of it also has to do with power, I think, because, you know, the white male has for so long had this power, and it feels threatened. And I think that's one of the main things that you got to worry about. Gay, you know, you talk about representation in media. Even though women have less rights and less of the equality, they still have better representation, because straight men are less threatened by a lesbian couple in media, because there's also always that, you know, weird back fetish thing of women together. and straight men are more threatened by gay couples. I mean, we're so proud of Greg Berlanti for having all this representation, and we have that woman in the main show, and we have, you know, we're far off from having like a full-on embrace series where the lead male is gay, and that's the other end of the scale, because as some of the community stuff we have to get into there. So when you're talking about who's next for representation, that's very much true. It's like we need to normalize one step at a time.
Yeah.
So, Courtney, go on.
I was going to say, circling back to part 1, it was that toe hold. Is that what you?
One toe at a time.
One toe at a time. Yeah. It kind of circles back to that, but in terms of the thing, it is also the separation comes from a certain sense of, oh my God, here's this word for this thing that I've been experiencing. Here are these people that belong to this word. And here is this other. And this other scares me. Mm-hmm. Or this other ostracizes me. Or I've been traumatized by this other. And sometimes it's really hard to separate the big other from the multiple little others that make up it. Like, when I was growing up, I was an outcast, just straight up. Like, I was that social outcast for multiple reasons. Like, I didn't belong anywhere specifically until I found the internet community. So to me, it's just like, I've always been on that fringe, no matter what. So it was always fun looking on the outside in, because to me, it's just like, we're people. I bleed red, you bleed red. I mean, I may be an alien, but at least I still have red blood.
So Tavis wrote an interesting note in our notes. I want to explore this one as well, because I also do think there's a point where we live at today where some people just want to find something to be different or mad at. And so let's explore this note Tavis wrote called Oppression Olympics. What is this?
So the Oppression Olympics is a concept that has been explored a bit in LGBT, well, not a bit, a great deal in LGBTQ psychology. And it kind of overlaps with what you guys have been talking about, which is intersectional identity. And it's the idea that our identities intersect in more than one way. It kind of challenges what we know psychologically. Normally, when we say your personality, a very Western American idea is that your personality is consistent over time. Intersectional identity challenges this and says that, you know, your personality is going to be different based on the time, history, culture, and relationship context you happen to be standing in at this moment. And just because you change doesn't mean the personality is fraudulent. Needless to say, when we start to think, like Brad, you mentioned about, you know, how there was kind of tensions between this disposable income that men have that women don't always have. And when we use intersectionality as a lens to that phenomenon, we can see actually what you're speaking to is specifically white men, because men of color don't have that higher income. But more importantly, when we use race as an intersectional lens, we can say, well, lesbian women who are white have greater income than lesbian women who are black. Needless to say, when we start to look at the different intersections and the systems of oppression that exist each time you add another intersection, and I say add just for simplicity because it's not about additive identity.
Right. It's more of a thing.
The idea basically is we have within LGBTQ plus an oppression Olympics. And the oppression Olympics is whoever is suffering from the most oppression has the philosophical imperative to be helped first. And the people who unfortunately are in the position of power to help any of us are white, cisgendered, heterosexual people in legislation, government, etc. So it's a little bit like brothers and sisters fighting for parents' attention in a very, backward analogy, that we are arguing amongst ourselves who is the most oppressed so that our privileged parents will address that person's needs first. And unfortunately, there isn't a clear answer who wins the Oppression Olympics, and it might be questionable whether we should be Olympics or whether we should be in solidarity.
I would vote for solidarity because You brought the point where we have to look to our parents, which are these regular white guys out of touch with reality because they come from a very different time. I have to deal with one of these types of people every week, and he miscategorizes people, and he fear mongers, and he's in a position of power to do this fear mongering. Like when we were doing the bathroom bill here, he was 100% against it. He did this whole campaign about male perverts and with little girls in bathrooms, and these people were coming in helping to do these things. So this one lady comes and goes, "You're really doing this entirely the wrong way. I'm not going to voice this for you because it's a two-way street. There are people out there who want to pretend to be something that they're not, and there are people out there who have real issues. You can tell the difference. You can tell the difference is just some random dude walking into the women's bathroom as opposed to you can't tell if a real transgender person walks in there. You can't. So I liked talking about the Suppression Olympics thing because it's true. We need to be able to help everybody. But I think we should be more of a united front. And we need to understand that, yes, there are people out there who are taking advantage of the situation. And there are people out there who have real issues that need to be addressed and helped. So how do you identify the balance of those when you have the outside, which we're going to get to later, looking and going, this is just crazy. They're all this way. They're all that way.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the bathroom bill idiocy.
Brad and Courtney were here for that.
My biggest issue with that, though, is that looking at just the metrics of everything, most pedophilic men actually target young boys. Yes, young girls are also a target. Don't get me wrong. They need to be protected too. But if we're worried about the pedophilia and people being in a bathroom, let's not ignore the fact that young boys are also a target. And 9 times out of 10, they seem to be more targeted than young women.
And that's what the lady had said. She goes, "You're only focusing on one sex. There's also little boys that are dealing with this." She's like, "I don't know any parent who lets their little kid go to the bathroom by themselves." I mean,
yeah.
And it's a constant fear mongering when it comes to dealing with issues from the LGBT community just becoming equal, which I cannot believe we're having this conversation today. But equality, it should be something that's just given. But there are people out there actively fighting against it because they just see all the fake and bad things.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of like willful hatred. I mean, there are people who are pretty well informed. They know what's going on, and they just want to be hateful. Now, I don't think that's the majority. I think that's what the media wants us to think is. But then a lot of it is either just plain ignorance or completely just wrong information. And when you're talking about people in power, in the media especially, or even just like social media and people who hide behind anonymity, you're henpecking facts. You're highlighting the parts that you want to highlight, and that's kind of where we are right now. It's like we're talking about the bathroom thing. It's like, yeah, you can spin anything in media you want to, and right now it's the people who have the power to spin it negatively. I worry sometimes that that media, legitimate media especially, it is completely ambivalent. They don't care if it's good or whatever, as long as it's getting them advertisement, as long as it's getting them traffic and flow. I mean, I just see people morally in the background. They're going, it's like, okay, well, now nobody's scared of this anymore, so let's start going that way because that's what gets, Yeah, I have a natural cynic mistrust for media as a whole. So it's
ironic for what profession we're in, but yeah.
But I mean, we're not in news reporting. We're in entertainment. So
we are in entertainment. But it's also, it goes to something that can actually, there is an actual, I don't want to psychological experiment called the dihydrogen monoxide experiment. I actually I wasn't the one running it, but I actually experienced this in high school. The dihydrogen monoxide experiment. Do you know what dihydrogen monoxide actually stands for?
What?
H2O.
Yeah.
Water. Yeah. It's just water. But you term it as this sterile, scary chemical name. And all of a sudden, it's just like, what the hell is this? And why is it in everything? It's that kind of situation applied to GLBT. Again, going back to that thing of other, to a lot of the outside world that aren't GLBT, we are an other, and we are scary simply because we are this box that they don't get. And it's just...
It's one of the things I was talking to another friend last week about. It's one of my general philosophies in life. When you watch movies and TV and people go to court and they have to swear on a Bible, one of the first things that they say is, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the thing that the general people don't realize, and that's why the rest of the entire courtroom scene is fraudulent to me, is because they don't do this, and they let like lawyers do legal shenanigans, is that they say the whole truth because they recognize and acknowledge that a partial truth, even though technically true, out of context, is a lie.
Yeah, it's called lying by omission.
It's lying by omission, or it's just rephrasing, or it's saying something in a way that makes it sound different than it is. I see it in advertising constantly. When I was going for my graphic design degree and I was taking advertising, and it's like, the morality of advertising is just amuses me. I mean, you say things technically not a lie, but it's definitely, it's not the truth either, and you're still selling it like the truth. And I think that's what a lot of people fall victim to. I think it's where our healthcare falls victim to, because we don't know that food is bad for you because companies market them to make them look like they're healthy when they're really not. And I think that's kind of what, I think that's kind of what is going on right now with social media and media is that the people who want to maintain control but don't want to be called out, because we have a culture now that we actually are putting people on there, and we are so misled information wise. I mean, that's the biggest problem I see is, it's like you said, it's being able to label things in a way that we can understand them, but then having somebody come behind us and take it and twist it, it's the most dangerous thing we're facing right now.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's sex sells, but so does fear.
That's true. But I think the other thing we have is the next part of our talk. This is where it's probably going to get really in depth here is the gender issue. I don't know where they all came from, but it seems like there's a new gender at least every month. And there is multiple lists out there that are just extensive. Like there's one on Tumblr that's like 400 long. And then there's other ones that are more, I guess, I don't know how to put it, scientific about it. I don't know. But we have changed a norm that's been around for centuries. And I know that they changed and added to the gender definition, which is a complete opposite of what the original definition was. So now there's two definitions of gender. So my first question is since we're understanding ourselves more and we're trying to identify these things, who is creating all these different genders? Does anybody know?
They're self-creating, honestly.
Is it safe to self-create something?
When you don't have a language for it, then yeah, you have to come up with a language. Because here's the fun thing, and I'd have to dig it back up, but the original two-bin model was never intended for consistent use. The two-bin model was the best thing when gender started being, actually discussed as a model of scientific thought. The two-bin model was just, this is what's based on current observation way back before the 1940s. And here's another thing that I'll get into later. The Nazis were the worst thing to happen to gender theory because they burned an entire library of research that spanned decades.
Wow.
So that's the Nazis for you.
Yeah. There was a German scientist who was studying gender theory, and all that got burned, setting us back literal decades. But that two-bin theory that we've been clinging to for so long was never meant to last for more than just that initial time period.
But wasn't the original definition of gender related to your sex at birth? I mean, that's all it was meant to do. It wasn't meant to talk about your sexuality.
there's a thing though. Gender does not equate sexuality. Gender, just because I have tits and I identify as female 90% of the time, does not equate my sexuality.
Well, I mean, the sex you were born with, not your preferences.
Yeah, biological sex. Yeah, biological sex in that case is also not a good binary thing, because if you actually take a look at actual biology, the actual like chromosomes and physical sexual characteristics, it's not just a binary. You have intersex, you have those who are born without sexual characteristics. You have those who are born with the internal organs of a uterus and ovaries, but they actually have male outer characteristics. They have the penis and they have a scrotum. It is, again, physical sex was never meant to be a strict binary. You look at chromosomes, you have females who have both the XY and XX combination. You have males who have the XX and the XY combination. What you were taught in middle school about sexual chromosomes is at this point completely debunked. Like, if you actually took a look at my chromosomes, there is a significant chance that I actually don't express the...
I'm going to show what while you're talking, I'm showing what Tavis is showing us.
Okay. Yeah.
So keep talking.
Thank you. I could not remember his name. But if you look at that, I probably don't express the proper, I can't remember if it was XY or XX for female, but I probably don't express that simply based on my own health experiences recently and PCOS. But that thing, binary was never meant to remain binary. Right. It's just, it was a binary at the time because that was what was just
easy.
Simple. It was easy and simple observation. But now that we've gone through the scientific method and applied it to both actual biological sex and psychological gender, which when you actually look at it, the brain of a trans female matches a biological brain of a biologically as female at birth a person.
The amygdala.
Yeah, the amygdala. But you look at that, and you have to remember that even the scientists themselves have said that binary should be broken down into multiple identifying bins. And some of these new gender identity definitions, in a few years, they're probably not going to exist in the same way they exist right now. Because, like I said earlier in this part, the language is expanding at a rapid pace.
I think it's a little too fast for some people, though.
It is a little too fast for some people.
Is the fact that, we have a new one every day, and I made an observation about this to my husband way back when it started getting really pumped up, and I said it kind of flippantly, offhandedly, but at the same time, when I examined what I was saying, I kind of realized that to a degree, a lot of it is no different than back when
murdered.
Not my guys.
It's the dog.
Okay. It's like, when we were growing up, you had goth, and then you had emo, and then you have hipster, and those are a random classification of a group or class as well. And I think that we're having is like what Tavis was saying is there's an intersection. So now we're getting to the point where there is the gender identity as a cultural phenomena overlapping. So now we have what is more of people wanting to feel like there's a group, and they have a group of like minds of whatever. And I think that's going to evolve too. Some of the ones that are, I think, identified as gender identity are eventually going to level out into a lesser group. It's not going to be hundreds, you're saying new ones every day. But at the time, we have, the punk movement, and we have the whatever. And I think we're at a level now where sexual expression is the new vogue. And so there's a lot of, when especially teenagers, especially in puberty, when you're going out to express yourself, when we were kids, we did that through music or whatever, because we weren't going to get away with doing as much of the I couldn't have definitely, I won't lie, I was way more stylish for my age than the other kids. I got picked on because I dressed like way out of everything. So it was more my self-expression, but I would have never been able to get away with just being straight out gay or whatever, or trans or dressing like a girl or anything like that. And I think now, because we are giving validity to other sexual identities, both physical and psychological, that you're always going to have the youth looking for the new way to test the system and to be unique and to stand out and find their own way. And so right now, because of gender questions, that's added in the package.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask Tavis this question, because I asked to begin with, and the answer was that people are making it up. Should we, one, be using the term gender to describe this? And two, should we be waiting for professionals to come up with these kind of diagnoses so that they're easily more acceptable? Because the reason we accepted those earlier ones is because they're scientific. And I think as a whole, people who don't understand would probably be a little more apt to accept it and understand it if it came from like a doctor or psychologist as opposed to Mary Jo blogger.
So what you highlight is kind of the undercurrent of what we're discussing is, should we be trusting professionals? And as anyone perhaps who identifies as LGBTQ would know, that there is this presentation that a psychologist or a doctor or a psychiatrist is objective because they're trained in a scientific method of understanding the human body. But what we know is that they are not objective, that they have their personal biases. So this was investigated thoroughly by Foucault in France when he examined the power differences in the clinic. And what this extrapolated to is the idea that, no, we should not be trusting professionals to define our identities for us, because professionals are there as clinicians to support society's status quo. So take, for example, the idea that there are people genuinely born intersex, and doctors used their power and authority to mutilate their genitalia and assign them a gender different from their birth, which was a third gender, because it supported what society wanted out of a two-gender system. And Foucault points out to us that, no, we should not be trusting professionals to dictate what our gender should or should not be. And it brings forward a discussion around free will. And can we express our own gender? We can start to bring in from Foucault ideas from Judith Butler and gender performativity, in which case gender is not what you're born with. Gender is not what culture says you are. Gender is a verb. Gender is what you do. And so gender is not what your genitalia is, it's what you are performing at any given moment with your clothes in the historical context and your behavior. In which case, this opens the door to a multitude of genders, and people are entitled to identify however they want. They don't need a professional's opinion to decide what gender they're going to be. And this is where the queer social constructionist argument has settled, and why we're starting to see an explosion of genders that we never saw before, because people, particularly from the queer community, are starting to embrace the freedom that they now have to not just take the gender that society, their doctor or their parents or their religion ascribes to them. They can explore, they can decide, and it might change not just on a day-to-day basis, but an hour-by-hour basis.
Yeah, exactly.
Be in any position to tell them what they can't say their gender is.
I think what Gavin's concern isn't so much that they were who assigns what. It's what he was saying, that with so many, and especially when you were talking about, the not necessarily competition, but definitely the need to allot resources for who needs the help at what time. When we have so many, And it's like, okay, it's like we're still trying to figure out the trans thing, and now this next thing is trying to take the spotlight, and it's not that anybody doesn't deserve the spotlight, but we get to the point where it's like we've got.
How do you fully understand something if it's always there's something new tomorrow? And I look at it this way because, like, if you go look at the Tumblr list, it's one of them is nocturnal gender. Your gender is based on the night. To me, that's more of a personality thing. So is gender technically your personality? And why are we not just saying it's a personality? How do we change the conversation from gender being related to how you were born to this is your personality? If we don't have, someone.
It's finding the balance. At what point do we get to where we're going too far?
If I have a strong opinion to express, it's that if you want to learn about genders and different gender identities, Tumblr is probably not your most credible source.
It's not.
Right. Tumblr is the one most people go and look at. It's this whole the outside looking in. They look at the Tumblr thing. They call them the Tumblrites. They call them the triggered people, and
that one I can argue simply because Tumblr is a platform used primarily by the younger generations. It was not built for people my age. It was not built for the older half of the millennium generation. It was born from the needs of the lower and younger half of the millennium generation and Gen Z and the next generations. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at all this dismissiveness as simply the older generations outright dismissing of the younger generations, which has been a thing since time immemorial. It's not necessarily...
But it's a different thing when you want to dismiss that there's a monster under the bed, or you don't want
not necessarily.
But as opposed to, okay, well, you change. You have some people look at it. Okay, well, your nocturnal gender, your gender changes by night. However you feel at the nighttime, there's a completely different level of dismissal between raising a kid and understanding that, because to most people that doesn't make sense because they're used to one thing. So how do you get them to understand?
It's the natural rebellious nature of youth, and it's something that needs to be written out. Honestly, I think it's something that will you let them have it. If it turns into a thing, well, then we'll address it. If not, there's that part of it. Like I said before, it's like this week I'm one thing, and the next week I'm another thing, and it's how you grow and learn. Maybe they just need to know what they are and haven't figured it out yet, and that's the best they can put the words to it.
Yeah, like I said, language doesn't exist, but it's also, sorry, Tavis, for cutting off. It's also the fact that they are young, they are exploring, and honestly, if they're not actively causing harm, they're not even passively causing harm. Why is it such a big thing? Let these kids learn who they are. Let them come up with the language to define themselves. And
yes, they're also part of a bigger world that's had some preconceived notions that we're trying to change. And I don't think coming up with a different gender day is helping that change at all, because it's just like if you're raised without a set of guidelines, how do you know? There's that.
It does get to the point where technology is taking too much of a center stage. You're right. It's one thing to say, this is how it was when we were kids. We were just, we dressed weird and listened to annoyed our parents with music. But now we have internet and connectivity, and people are like larger communities, and always, like I said, the threat of media influence on stuff. So you're right, Gavin. That is a concern. It's letting. Again, I always have to try and find the balance for things, but there is, to me, a point where, we kind of have to go, okay, guys, you're stretching. Does that make sense?
And I hate to say it that way, but I'm all for people expressing and figuring out who they are, but I wonder if future generations can be able to handle that well, because like I said, I was trying to say, there's this couple who are raising their kid completely gender free, let him do what they said. One week he decided he was a squirrel, and just let him do what he wanted to do as a squirrel. If you're not setting guidelines of understanding what these roles are and how you want to fit outside or inside those roles, or the importance of things like that, not that there's can only be two roles. I'm just saying, if you're given some guidelines to understand things, then how are you going to grow to figure out really who you are if you're just going to every day be like, okay, well, today I am a tree. Tomorrow I am a dog. Thursday I'll be a boy. Saturday I'll be a girl. when the whole world is looking at you and not quite understanding, because that's not coming from anything that they know to be proven.
Yeah. I kind of think I see where you're going from, because it's something one of my art teachers had said to me. You know, it's like you can't break the rules until you know what the rules are.
Yeah, that's the way. Like, I'm not the best with words sometimes, and I use the wrong word.
No, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you.
But you know, people will trust if it comes from a doctor. People will trust if it comes from a psychologist or someone who understands, like Tavis, who does research into this stuff.
Yeah.
But when you just look online and you see,
it's hard not to have that subconscious thought of, okay, is this genuine or is this somebody just testing the system for attention?
Yeah, and I hate people who want to test the system for attention.
And you can't just make those people are there either, because
all of us in this group know people who have real issues. And I trust people who are faking those issues, and I drop them. I drop them like a bad habit, because it trivializes things.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm afraid that we're trivializing ourselves every day by coming up with more and more things, and
by validating everything without question.
Yeah. I mean, am I wrong in this thought?
Not necessarily. I mean, granted, I'm not a professional psychologist. I'm leaving that to Tavis. But the way I look at it is, when I was growing up, mainly because I didn't have Tumblr to, you know, at least give me a direction to go.
Right.
The closest I had to gender fluidity was a term that I actually cannot claim because I am not Native American. That term was Two-Spirit. It was ascribed to me because somebody who was Native American recognized that in me. But it's, at the time, that was the only language I knew for what I was feeling. Now that I was older and I actually was able to look up some things, I found gender fluid, which actually fits and is not a term reserved for certain Native subcultures and tribes. It's a term that I can actually claim because I'm, you know, white bread girl over here.
Yeah.
But that same argument extends. Yes, there are 400 definitions and 350 of them are probably going to disappear in the next 5 years. Those 350 will be replaced by 200 more. And then those 200 will be replaced by 150 more. It's language creation at this point. Yes, some of it is bullshit, but if it's not doing any harm, and by harm, I mean trivialization is something that you're always going to experience. It was back in the early part of the century, there was just lesbian or there was just gay. There was no term for bisexual. And then
there kind of was.
Well, there kind of was, but I mean, it's as our world interconnects more and more because of the internet, language is going to become bigger and broader, and it's going to change. That's the nature of language. The language, English that we speak today, is not the same language that was spoken even 150 years ago. Yeah. I mean, yes, there's a whole lot of similarities, but language by definition will change. And all of these massive lists of definitions and words, 9 times out of 10, yes, they can be condensed into one thing. But you have to let it get through that first. Yeah. Yes, it feels like it's going to be a trivialization for the moment, but in 20 years, when the next generation of kids are going through their own self-explorations and trying to figure out, why do I feel like this? What is this word that I cannot find for myself? Oh, hey, here's this thing. Oh, okay, I can start here and go forward. And that's another thing going by that, is that, yes, this is also the internet. Yes, some of this is people doing shit for shits and giggles. But you would have had that in the 1950s. You had that in the penny novels of the 1890s and things like that. Troll culture is always
I think the difference is in 20 years, our kids will be more open-minded and we'll be more open-minded because we've already lived through this once. Mm-hmm. It's just...
I had the benefit of my mother, and her brother was gay. So she had already... helped him come out to my family, which, didn't, it still took a while for them to get home to it. But then once I came out...
It needs to be quiet over there.
Use your mic when you're not talking, Gavin.
Maybe he hears my voice and I'm setting him off. But Yeah, it's the things change and the language change and our resources change too. I had read just recently interesting article on gay porn, talking about how necessary it was for the evolution of coming out and gay normalization, because it's not like they teach gay sex and sex ed, lesbian or male. And
yeah, but that also leads down a very dangerous road, because a lot of that is very extreme and not healthy. And that's,
you have an inaccurate representation. You have a product that's sold. So you have people who don't know where to go, kids or whatever. You don't have anybody to tell you the proper way to do it, or what's right. And so you end up, and you have this whole generation of gay culture that it stems from this, and they have these bizarrely, wildly inaccurate ideals of what sexuality should be. And now that we're getting to where it's safer to have open conversations about it, and to do that, we don't have that same kind of association with, but I dare you, type in gay anything on Google. Just put gay anything.
Without safe search, you're going to get a lot of things.
I guarantee it's porn. Just Google alone automatically associates the word gay with porn. I'm just telling you right now.
Tavis, do you have any last thoughts on gender before we move on to the last part of this section?
Yeah. I wanted to kind of say I agree with Courtney in that the language around gender and sexuality is always changing. And one of the challenges with being born at any given point of history is there's hyper focus on what's going on around us and a great deal of concern about what's going to happen ahead of us. But nobody's looking backwards. And this is the value in understanding our history. We have had words for all of these different genders and identities before, and they come and go as science, history, fashion, knowledge changes. I mean, how many people here are currently identifying as an earning? Because an earning was one of the first classification systems for a man who's sexually attracted to a man, according to Havelock Ellis. How many people here are identifying as Freud's polymorphious perversion? Because that's the original term for bisexuality from a psychological.
I think I met a Cthulhu furry that used that name.
The point here is that there is a lot of attention, and to answer your question very directly, Gavin, you're noticing that there's a lot more genders today than there seems to have been before. And you're right. But I would emphasize first that social media should not be your point of reference. It's an echo chamber. You have 400 gender identities. How many people exist in the world, and what is that a proportion of? And is anybody doing any fact checking of this list? And it could be somebody who truly identifies that way. It could be people having a laugh. Who knows? But the point of the story is that language will change as science, history, political need demands. One of the things is that I tell my friends as a joke is that I qualified as a gay psychologist just in time to be classified as an antique, because gay is going to be the identity of the last century. People are going to stop identifying as gay, and that's okay, because many of us don't want to identify as a homosexual or an earning anymore. It's just the natural progression of change. And I often think the insecurity around all these words has more to do with our insecurity around aging than it necessarily does to be a great deal of concern around, are people going to be safe or understand? Listen, you put two people in a room together and explain nothing to them, and they will learn how to fuck. So the identities are consequential to the behavior. They will call themselves whatever they feel like calling themselves, because ultimately the performance need not dictate the sexual behavior.
All right, so it's going to lead to our last part of the show, which is the outside looking in, and how do we fix these perceptions, if there's a way to fix it, if there's a way to handle it. Because we talked about infighting, how we don't always get along, the oppression Olympics, things like that. But when you're on the outside and you're looking on the inside and you're reading the things like You read about furries, which you briefly talked about last episode. Now they're completely miscategorized. You read the stories about now that the transgender are attacking drag queens for, I think it's they think they're being made fun of. You've got the Tumblr thing going on. How do we fix this so that we don't have to wait another generation for things to get better? I guess is the best way to put it. And so when we look at how we're perceived in media, a lot of it's kind of extreme. Some of it's really normal, but mostly, like, if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, those are some catty bitches. They expect gay guys to just be catty and mean and self-centered, like, all the time. When you see all the, like, news reports from Pride Days, they're mostly bondage parades is what they're being shown to the general public, like leather daddies and stuff like that. How do we start fixing that?
Well, I would suggest that you pay attention to all the activists that are always at the parade as well.
Yeah. There's never pictures of them. You always got pictures of the guy on the leash and the dog collar being walked. Like,
how do we get the people who are showing us to the world, outside of ourselves, to see those parts of it and not the extreme parts? Because it's like you're saying, no news is good news, and sex sells, and it's more fun to when there's a gay pride, it's more fun to take pictures of the people who are doing weird things or look weird or look odd, but then that's programming the general public to think that that's the norm. And that's one of the things we've been fighting this whole time is you don't see them on the news. You straight people aren't going to go, oh, and this is the Gay Association of Tax Attorneys. They're not making it up on the news. And that's kind of what Gavin was saying. It's like, there's so much more that we need to do to normalize. I know GLAAD does what they can, but we need something bigger and better than that is basically what it comes down to.
I would also trouble the word normalize, because normal is a standard set by heterosexuals. And why should we be conducting ourselves to that standard? There is nothing wrong with wanting to parade down the street with latex. It's only a problem if your standard of what you categorize in a good, bad binary is not wearing latex. So I'm not sure.
More of a balance.
So hold on, Brad. What would the word be? Because I use normalize as acceptance. That this, not everyone is like you. More power to them. Let's not make a fuss about it.
That's kind of how I think of it.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, what should we use?
You said it yourself, Gavin. You said acceptance.
Okay, but there's one thing to be, I just accept it, or there's another thing to, I accept it and I understand. I mean, yes, I can accept that wall's white, and I don't have to like it. But right. I know no one's never going to like anything, but to be like, you live your life, that's fine. So maybe acceptance is the right word.
It's like it's no big deal. Literally, it means it's like one way or the other. It doesn't pass. That's how it works in my definition of it. It's like, this is how people are. Nobody gets upset, but nobody, praises it. That's what it means to me. Is like, this is just is. That's how my brain uses that word.
Something that Courtney said earlier that I often use as a guiding principle in these situations is, where's the harm? And a lot of people, unfortunately, are not in touch with kind of the ethics of philosophy, as it were. But the harm principle is a wonderful guiding force to decide. Someone is walking down the street in pup leather gear, being led by someone on a chain. Okay, where is the harm? How is that harming another person when both of those people are consenting?
I can tell you where the harm is. It comes from what I like to call the Christian cult. That is the majority of the people. They don't like things that make them uncomfortable. And I know it's not harmful what they're doing, but it's being perceived as because of these people.
So why don't we prescribe the blame of the harm with the people it belongs to and not blame the victims?
We should. We 100% should, because we have these Christian people out there who are wanting to lynch gay people. We have them wanting to be able to be racist and discriminatory because that's their religious freedom. They don't understand that we live in a world and a country where not everyone agrees. We're supposed to be the melting pot here. Everybody can be who they need to be. So how do we handle that aspect? How do we handle this? Is there even a way to handle this Christian right?
It's interesting
Calling them out.
What you've described, Gavin, is a bit of an oxymoron. So that everyone can be who they want to be in the melting pot. Those are opposite things. The point of a melting pot is that everybody is supposed to be melting into the same thing, one cultural identity of American. And that is the problem, is the melting pot.
Oh. See, I never thought about it like that, because you always hear the melting pot. Oh, it's a multicultural. Everybody can be what it like. That's what we're taught melting pot is.
That's the American narrative. The idea that you go to America to become American, to have a break from your past. And this is what is defining what is normal. It is that you join the melting pot and you do what white suburbia in power decides you're going to do now. And this is something that we see across cultures is not the way it has to be. I mean, you don't need to look far to see the melting pot hypothesis in America ain't working.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to relate this to something that Gavin could probably really easily see. Look at the Borg in Star Trek. What is their big thing?
They assimilate.
And you see how harmful that is in that universe.
Yeah, but they assimilate to add to the collective consciousness.
Yeah, and
so they're doing it the wrong way.
But here's also the thing. Assimilation itself is also seen as a very negative thing from an outside looking in. Like a Seven of Nine's character arc in Voyager. She has to reacclimate to not being a collective whole and finding her individualism again. And that's something that is both the best and worst thing about America, is that we have such an intense focus on individualism that when people want to have an individualistic collective identity, as in they're Iranian or they're Nigerian or they're Sioux or Cree or any number of the First Nations that were here, you get to that level of individual collectivism and it's suddenly like, why are you doing this thing? Why are you not doing this thing like my German ancestors did? Kind of thing. Yes, melting pot was a good word at one point. Melting pot no longer applies because at this point, melting pot literally means let's go to the basic white bread, white gravy, bland bullshit.
Monoculture.
I guess there's not an answer to how we can fix this before the next two generations step in and be like, because I mean, look what's happening with the younger people. They're creating these identities. They're doing so when they get to the point of, I mean, we just have way too many old school thinking people who I just don't understand them. How have you not learned from history?
Because they don't want to. But here's the other thing. No, it's not going to be.
I don't think it's going to want to. I think it scares them because
it does scare them.
They're only used to one way of life.
And unfortunately, you can't just blame older generations. That's one of the things that I fear is that, you know, we have a lot of our culture and our people are waiting. I was like, oh, we're just going to wait it out. You know, honestly, I didn't think I would see gay marriage in my lifetime. You know, I am so lucky, blessed to have seen as much progress.
Phil was the same way. He was so happy when that day came.
But at the same time, you know, it's like I recognize that this is something that has built up over many years. It's like dieting. You know, you can't expect to just, you know, eat all you want to for years and then go on a crash diet and then get in shape in a month. All that's going to do is harm everybody. It's got to be, if it's going to be it's got to be an actual change in lifestyle. And I think that's where we are is like, this is a lot of people expect too much too fast, you know, and then, but at the same time, you have to be diligent and work for it, you know, so we need a path and it's going to continue to grow. And like you said, it's going to be a couple of generations before it really, really balances out, you know, but that doesn't mean give up either.
And another thing that I want to point out, the best way to change, even though it's not going to change significantly even in 2 generations, the best way to start affecting that change is calling out the bullshit when you see it, no matter who it is.
We're getting real good at that these days. I love it. I absolutely love it.
There is a slight caveat to that. Yes, call it out. If you're the one being called out, don't expect more than just, hey, Google this as an answer. yes, it would be nice if you get, like, you're being called out for this because this no longer means what you think it means. But if somebody calls you out for your bullshit, be prepared to do that emotional labor yourself to figure out why you're being called out for your bullshit.
So I understand that aspect, which goes to a different aspect, which we had briefly talked about at the end of the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you draw the line with free speech? Like, where do you draw the line with they're allowed to think what they want to think?
People are allowed.
If there's no way, I mean, when we look at things that get blown out of proportion or things that are just misunderstood, because we do live in the age of disinformation.
And then there are some people who just want to watch the world burn and they like causing trouble.
Yeah.
I acknowledge those people are there too, and it's not always a legitimate call out, unfortunately.
Yeah. You're going to have to live with that too. I mean, I've been called out for stuff that I'm just like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to Yes, I've been called out for stuff before.
That's what I'm saying. I've had that too. I've had both sides of it. I've had like, what? And then I'm like, okay, well, let's look at it.
I see where you're coming from, but where you're coming from is, while it's valid, it has value. It has no value to me because it's.
But does that mean, does that disenfranchise, or what's the word? What am I, Tavis, maybe you can help me. Does that disregard what they're saying, though? If you just don't agree with it, does that disregard that makes you right? Tavis?
Well, no. I think an important thing that we need to be aware of first is that you are not entitled to your opinion just for the sake of having it. Opinions must be defensible, and they must be defensible on rationality, evidence, and logic. And the problem isn't that people have contrasting opinions, but rather we have validated the indefensible opinion in modern America, that you can believe whatever you want to believe and evidence be damned.
Yeah.
And this is where we're really struggling now, because the word, and the word is quite useful, entitlement in an entitled opinion. And this is the problem, is that we all want our opinions, but as an actual value. And as someone living in Europe, I can certainly point out this difference. Americans don't want to talk about politics, which is perhaps one of the reasons why our media is so loud, is because people don't want to have interpersonal discussions with their family and friends. If you were to come over here, visit me in London, and we go to a pub, which has just recently been allowed to open, you will have,
we're allowed back.
you will have complete strangers approaching you, shaking your hand, and testing your opinions on Trump within about 5 minutes, because that culture of discussing politics is embedded not just here, but across all of Europe, because through dialogue, this is how we understand. But Americans have foreclosed on the dialogue at the interpersonal family friend level. Yeah. And our only outlets have become social media and general media. And this is why it kind of looks knuck and futz.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of times it's like people say stuff that I completely just don't agree with, but I don't even have the strength to touch that dumpster fire because it's going to blow up in my face, and I know it, and I know the lack of rationality in people, and especially because I'm a very animated person and I'm a very passionate person when I speak, even with evidence, it's hard to see past what my girlfriend calls filters. Everybody has these filters in their mind of what they think people mean. And it's really hard to pass those barriers and be like, okay, and even when I'm open-minded, I'm like, okay, I see why you think this, that's not really how I feel. I understand why you think that. Maybe I worded it wrong, because your filter of this word is a different connotation than what I think this word means, and there's a lot of disconnect there. And sometimes it's not even worth the fight. Sometimes I just can't even handle it. I know.
Yeah. It boils down to another thing where a lot of American politics have conflated politics with morality. Morality is a big part of our political system, unfortunately. And a lot of these times where you say something because your sense of morals say this is a bad thing. Killing people is a bad thing. This whole Black Lives Matter thing is a matter of morality. It's not a political opinion. But a lot of people will think of it as a political opinion because so much of American politics was built on this moral conflation with it. And
we just live in a messed up day and age.
we do live in a messed up day and age. But another thing that's problematic here is that if you have this plain out shitty opinion, 9 times out of 10, somebody who has that shitty opinion is also going to expect the person they're arguing against to do 99.9% of the work in trying to refute it. People who have, especially like the trolls, especially, expect emotional labor. Trolls especially, but I mean, considering 99% of our politicians are trolls. But you have this expectation of, oh, somebody has a shitty opinion. Oh, fuck, I'm going to have to do all this emotional labor just to prove them wrong. And
or you could just ignore them. That's what I end up doing.
Yeah,
there's a problem with ignoring somebody, too. You become part of what they call a silent majority, and silent majority is often ascribed to agreeing with the worst possible position.
That's always a problem. There's just like, it's like, I can't fight with you. I'm especially not I don't. So many irrational people. There's so many times when I know I've been led into a booby trap, and then it's like, oh well, I've got this friend and this friend and this friend and this friend and this friend tag, and now there's like 30 people tagged with this opinion to prove me wrong, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna go in here with 30 people. I have no idea who you are. Your opinion may very well be valid. It may be, but I'm not going to sit here for 3 hours sifting through what may or may not be from people I don't know. And I know damn well this is just designed to trick me into saying something that you can take out of context and turn it into what you wanted to say. And it's like, it's not even remotely what I said, but and then we'll do it too. People will sit through and go through people's whatever, and they will pick just the pieces and build a whole script to make something out of what they want. And that's the unfortunate power of the media, and we don't have people using it responsibly.
I actually strangely went through that recently with a secular Bible argument. Somebody was trying to argue that Bible scientists have all the pieces and we have a complete Bible.
I understand that one as well.
And this is coming from the pagan. The pagan is going, you're full of bullshit.
No.
All right, so that's it for this show. We covered all the topics we had left over. A very interesting show. I learned some things. I'm sure a lot of people are learning some things, and I'm glad we got all these questions out there. But the biggest thing to take away at the end of the day is have conversations with people. Let them understand where you're coming from and how these things came to be. Refer to the show if you need to.
Yes.
That's why we're doing this.
It's there's an understanding that's happening, and there's a shift in the way the world is working, and it's time to get on board. It's the best way to put it. There's no reason to be dragging your feet, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all neighbors. We're all here together, and we just need to make this place a better place for everybody, no matter what you may think of them.
Yeah.
They have as much as a right to what they want to do and how they want to express themselves as you do. And so I want to thank you guys again. Last call out. Tell everyone where they can find you. Let's start with Brad.
You can find me Tuesdays at 7:30 on Brad's Red Web. It's on Facebook and YouTube and Kaiju Labs Media YouTube page.
Yep. Courtney.
I can be found here on Kaiju Labs Media. You will be able to start tomorrow as we record this. I don't know what time this is actually airing, but you will be able to find me on Twitch and DLive at Little Loudmouse, LILLOUDMOUSE. I will be streaming World of Warcraft and writing and a few things. And you will be able to eventually find me doing my podcasts and Fandom Nonconforming here on Kaiju Labs Media. More on that when I actually get everything settled.
And then our very special guest, thank you immensely for coming and contributing. I'm pretty sure, said a lot of things people can understand.
Yes, a lot to learn.
I like to call it the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting up with me, because I can be very opinionated and salty.
No, you're fantastic. Don't be daft.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. For people who are interested in my research and what I'm doing, I'm not nearly as tech savvy as my friends here, but I can be found on Facebook. LGBTQXC is my handle at Facebook. And if you are interested in learning interpersonal communication and counseling skills, I will be teaching an open online class from Richmond, the American International University, available online. Just look for Counseling Skills, richmond.ac.uk, and you could have me teaching you how to counsel others.
So thank you guys for being part of our 2-part Pride show. We hope everyone learned things and had a good time with it. I know I had a good time with it. I love talking to you guys, and I love everyone that's part of our lovely family here at these studios. I've worked a long time to figure out what to do and how to get everyone together, and I like the fact that we're across culture, we're across gender, we're everything here, and that makes me really excited. So from all of us to you guys, thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed all of it. If you want to see more, comment away, let us know. You can always email us. There's contact forms on the website, kaijudivemedia.com. Just let us know. I mean, maybe we'll do some more of these in the future. I really don't know, but we will be doing more special programs. And of course, Courtney has her whole idea coming up. So that's it for now.
Continuing conversation. Bye, y'all.